All right, so first of all, welcome everyone. I know there's a few of you online, which I appreciate. The rest of the guys that are not here with us, you'll get to watch this video on LMS. So the purpose of this evening's session is really to give you guys a heads up about what EMS4 Work Integrated Learning Extension, or WEX, is all about. I've called this session Everything You Need to Know. So essentially the nuts and bolts of how the subject's going to run, how you get the best out of it, what assessments are involved, the do's and don'ts, and some information about confidentiality around your positions and so on. I'm going to share my slides to start with, and we'll go through the rest. So here we go. And I will do F5. Bear with me. Actually, I might do this. Sorry guys, just bear with me for one moment while I get this bad boy up. There we go. Everyone can see that. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, what is EMS4WEX all about? How does it relate to EMS4WIL? So the original idea around EMS4WEX was that it was going to be an extension of EMS4WIL. And the reason the extension is that a lot of companies were concerned that after 6 months of training you on the job, that they were going to lose you during the semester, in semester 2, to another company. And we've had that happen a few times, but let's say that in about 75 to 80% of the cases, students do stay on with the companies. It's not just the loyalty thing, it's really about the time that was put into developing you as a professional engineer, the relationships that you've built, and things have worked well. In the last 12 months, though, we've need to make some revisions to the course. And one of the revisions was that we include a research angle to EMS4WIL. When we say research, we don't necessarily mean research in the classical sense where you sit and optimize equations or read papers and write stuff up. It's really about developing your ability to do some sort of development for an organization and be able to write a technical report at the end of all of that. Engineers Australia likes to compare EMS4WIL to a capstone project. So if you weren't doing a work integrated learning placement, you'd probably be doing a final year project. So how does the final year project stack up against the 4th year work integrated learning subject? So in order to sort of bridge the gap between the two, what we've done is a hybrid stepping stone between where we're going and where we are now. So where we are now is what you guys have done in EMS4WIL. Didn't really have much of a technical report writing exercise. It was really focused on developing certain professional skills and addressing certain Engineers Australia competencies. In order to address the gap, what we're doing is EMS4WEX will be an extension of your work with the company. However, your main sort of output in EMS4WEX will be a technical report. So we will be able to take your technical report and compare that technical report to what a final year capstone project might look like, and say, yes, the students got an equivalent experience and they developed sort of around about the same skills in both of these instances. And you can see here the subject overview. I don't want to go through too much of this. It essentially explains, you're going to be developing some ability to develop research, write a report, develop methodologies, look at critical analysis of certain parts of your report, and so on. So here's how the whole thing comes together. As you guys know, I love my diagrams. This is a system flow diagram explaining the whole from EMS4WIL to graduate. And as you can see at the top over here, we have 800 hours of WIL. So let's assume that you have all completed 800 hours of WIL, which I think 95% of you have. You have two options. So option number one is, this is the one that's most common. Most of you will actually stay on with your company. And when you stay on with your company, in the past, that was actually an agreement between the university and the company. Right now, that's actually an agreement between you and the company. So the university has nothing to do with your placement in the company. So whether you're working 2 days a week, 1 day a week, or not working at all, that's completely up to you. Now, you have two options. So if you do stay with the company or you don't stay with the company, either way, you have the option of enrolling in EMS4WEX, work integrated learning extension. So you're probably wondering, hey, why would I get enrolled in EMS4WEX if I'm not working for the company? You might recall that in semester 1, one of the tasks that I asked you to do was actually jot down some information about some of the challenges or topics that could be researched as part of your job. And these varied from company to company and the role that you were handling. But in general, most students jotted down a few challenges in the workplace that they could work on. What we want you to do in EMS4WEX is actually explore these challenges in depth and write a technical report about the actual problem, how you've attacked it, what research you've conducted, and how you've managed to solve it. Perhaps you've solved it, perhaps you haven't, but it's the methodology that counts really in this process. And if you look at this chart further, what you'll see that is EMS4WEX leads you on, regardless of whether it's the one that you placed in the company or not, leads you into having meetings with industry supervisors and academic supervisors. I'll explain what that supervision looks like, but essentially, if you're based in the company, if you're actually still doing your 2 days a week, that makes it very, very simple because you're already in the company. You're going to be able to have your fortnightly meetings with your industry supervisor. The goal here is that you have one meeting per week, and they alternate between your academic supervisor and your industry supervisor fortnightly. So the next stage of all of that is really that you need to arrange these fortnightly meetings with your supervisors, find your actual supervisors, and you go through various processes. You produce a final technical report and give an oral presentation. And I'll talk about that in more detail shortly. So here's how you get enrolled. As far as I know, Mark and a few of the other guys, Alex, you're online as well. You guys are already enrolled in the subject. If you're not, it's fairly simple to get enrolled. So first of all, you have to complete EMS4WIL, and you guys have, which is great. You must have room for an elective because EMS4WEX is actually an elective subject. So if you've taken something else along the way as an elective, you may not be eligible for EMS4WEX. You do need to see your subject coordinator to see whether you have room for it or not. So if you have room for it and you've passed EMS4WIL, you're then eligible to apply to enroll into this subject. You have to gain my approval. So this is not a subject that just automatically appears on your transcript. You do need to send me an email and ask for permission to enroll in the subject. I will then grant you permission. You PDF my email and you do a variation of enrollment, and you'll then enroll into the subject. Do not enroll into EMS4WEX if you're just planning to work for the company. The purpose of EMS4WEX is not that you go to a company and work. It's actually for you to actually do some research, write a technical report, and it has to have value for the company. So there's no point of you doing research or any sort of technical report writing for a company if it's just the sake of a report. It must be valuable to the company, and it must meet certain, agenda that we've set in this subject. You have to complete an administration form. Now, I've said here, if you look on your right-hand side, you'll see Engineering Hub. If you go to Engineering Hub and look up EMS4WIL, right at the bottom of the hub, you'll actually find this form called EMS4WEX Project Administration. The reason I've put it here is because if you're not currently enrolled in EMS4WIL, you can access the form from here. If you are enrolled in EMS4WEX, you can find this form in the actual subject LMS page as well. And the form itself is very, very simple. All it's really asking you to do is fill in your details, the company that you're based at, that you're doing your WEX at, if you are based at a company. If you're not based at the company physically in semester 2, but you're doing the research based on what you did in EMS4WIL, please put down the company here regardless. Put down the project title or whatever you're going to investigate or research as a topic. Make sure you put down what you're actually studying. The reason I'm asking for this is because it helps me find supervisors for your role. And then you'll see at the bottom, there's a section that's asking you for a brief description of the project research work that you're going to be conducting as part of EMS4WEX. This doesn't need to be super detailed. It's really to give me a heads up of what it is that you're looking at so I can adequately address supervisor issues. What is most important here is today is, I believe, the 11th of July. The enrollment deadline is the 21st of July. Technically, the enrollment deadline is really like 3 or 4 weeks into the semester, but you will fail EMS4WEX if you wait 4 weeks into the semester to enroll. I actually won't allow you to do that. So you do need to enroll by this particular date, and you need to complete this administration form along the way as well. So, question, working for the company. I explained earlier, you don't actually have to work for the company. I advise everyone to read the document that I sent out via LMS, everything you need to know about WEX. It explains about all the transitions, what you can, what you can't do. You are not obliged to work in a company you did your will with for WEX. Okay, so if you finished your 6 months, if you decide to keep on with the company, that's great. But if you don't, it doesn't really matter. You can still do your WEX as part of that. Hopefully, you've collected enough information based on your position in Will that you'll be able to conduct this research. Whatever you decide in semester 2 for WEX, you can continue working with the company, but it's a complete agreement between you and the company. The university is not involved, so you are no longer bound by this $10,000 scholarship. You can actually get a casual salary from the company if they find value in employing you. Any other questions regarding that, we can address later on. There are 4 assessments in this subject. You'll be very familiar with this structure. First of all, there's a project and research plan, which is worth 20%. It's actually due 2 weeks into the semester. And why is this important? We need to make sure that you're on the right course for this particular subject. I don't want anyone taking 4 or 5 weeks and then deciding that the path they've taken isn't adequate. It's really going to set you back. You've got plenty of time from now until the week 2 to decide what it is that you're going to do. I've put in a lot of guidelines on how you can write this project research plan. We can go into the details of that later. Assessment number 2 is an engineering journal. This is not a reflective journal where you're talking about your feelings and how this happened. It's really to make sure that you keep notes of all supervisor meetings. And that's why it's due every week of the semester. I'm not expecting you to write a philosophical entry into LMS. I expect to see some notes about your meetings with your supervisors, what you've determined, what's the path forward, challenges, and so on. I'll talk about that later on as well. That's worth 20%. Assessment 3 is essentially the sort of the capstone assessment in this subject. It's a technical project research report. It's due at the end of week 12. It's worth half of the subject's marks. And assessment number 4 is a video presentation. It's a 5-minute video presentation, and it's due at the end of week 12. It's essentially a video summary of your technical project report. Supervision. So first of all, you have to have an academic supervisor. You will not be allowed to continue in the subject unless you do this. You can have an industry supervisor, but it's not a must. Okay, so if you have an industry supervisor, that's great, but you don't really have to have one to complete this subject. So if you look at the left-hand side here, what I've tried to explain is here's where you are, or where you should have been a few months ago. You've completed your work experience, work integrated learning, and you would have done it in one of these areas or something in between. I don't want to go down to the gritty details of each one of these, but essentially you're doing something in this space. So where did I work? What did I do? What topic do I want to investigate? This is really up to you. These other 2 things here are fixed. And what you need to do is you need to figure out who is the appropriate departmental supervisor in the department that's going to supervise this particular work that you're doing. Secondly, you can see this arrow shooting off here. We have an industry supervisor with a question mark. If you decide to do this work for the industry, company and partner, you can have that industry supervisor. They can assist with whatever you're doing. If you don't, that's fine as well. Once you determine who the appropriate supervisor in the department is, you should know most of the lecturers by now. So if you're studying civil engineering, you'll know who is appropriate if you're working in some sort of, let's say, road infrastructure, materials, electronics, structural, whatever that might be that you're working on. Secondly, you need to confirm the supervisors and submit the forms. The admin form that I showed you on the previous slide over here, this is the form that will determine who your supervisor is. You should approach the supervisor, speak to the supervisor, and then get their confirmation. If you don't find yourself a supervisor in the allocated time, I will give you a supervisor. Now, you might think that's a pretty good option, but at the end of the day, you might have some supervisor academics that you're not in good books with, and vice versa. You're better off picking your own supervisor and negotiating that than having me address it. I will not take any emotions into account. I will just look at what you're doing and what the supervisor is an expert in and assign you a supervisor. After that, it's about meeting weekly and taking notes and moving on from there. So let's talk about the project plan. The project plan is really there to make sure that you have an idea of where you're going with this research technical topic. There's a document on LMS once you actually get assigned the LMS page and enroll, guidelines on producing a project plan. All there, you should read that. The project plan must be approved by your academic and industry supervisor before you actually submit it on LMS. It shouldn't be more than 10 pages long. It's really supposed to be a short document. Include graphs, diagrams, references. I've put a suggested structure here for you, but your supervisors will be able to provide a lot more detail in how you can do this and move forward from there. The engineering journal, it's all done online, LMS. There's a really short journal entries, but must have a structure, easy to follow. So don't just keep dumping sentence after sentence, and it's very hard to follow what you're talking about. And it really should document your meetings with your academic supervisor, industry supervisor, take notes on weekly work, research, learnings, track your project progress, take notes of any challenges, basically map your project journey along the way. Your technical project research report. This is actually a much bigger undertaking, but nevertheless, not an exuberant amount of work. I did say it's worth 50% of the subject. There is a guide to writing technical reports available on LMS. I've put it down on the subject. You must follow the following structure. And it's not because I'm anal about this structure. It's really about Engineers Australia accreditation, making sure that everyone understands how you write a technical report. I guess all of this is self-explanatory. The actual writing of technical reports guideline will explain other sections. The bit that's not flushed out here in detail is the sections which make up, the sections which make up the body of the report. And that'll be flushed out more in the guidelines, but the rest of the stuff is really, really straightforward. References are very important, so please don't neglect these two sections here, references and bibliography. Your video presentation, 5-minute video presentation. It can be plus or minus a minute. So let's say 6-minute presentation. Use some slides in your presentation. It's really vocally presenting what you did in your research technical report in the company and the report that you submit. So put some audio to the report. This item here is probably something that some of you are very familiar with. So if you're working in a company, it's very likely that you've signed some sort of non-disclosure agreement. And that means that whatever you're working on, it may not be allowed to be shared with public. However, there are some clauses in this statement which state that you can actually share this work with an academic supervisor so you can receive your mark. And a few of the guys that worked at Metro specifically asked that their videos not be uploaded on YouTube. And of course, we followed through with that protocol. We gave them a mark using a different method. So this is really up to you. You need to make sure and check whether you're bound by some sort of agreement in the workplace, whether you've signed one, whether you're going to sign one. Check what allows you to do, what it doesn't allow you to do. All of your industry content should also be vetted by your industry supervisor. We already did this as part of your EMS4 will to make sure that you don't breach any agreements. If your work is confidential, you should notify me early on so I can find a workaround solution for this. Now, the last thing that I have available here is really what I know about students at the moment. So on your left-hand side are the students that are currently enrolled in the subject. I believe Prasoon is not yet enrolled, but everyone else here is enrolled. And I know, Alexander, you're on here, and Mark, you guys are enrolled. These are 3 guys that I know that are not eligible, but everyone else, guys, you need to let me know. You need to apply, and you need to get enrolled. So I repeat, the date for the enrollment is stated over here. It's the 21st of July. So you need to make sure that as soon as possible, you submit this paperwork and at least an email to me asking to be enrolled at EMS4WEX. My preference is that you submit this project administration form together with your application into WEX. That makes my job a whole lot easier. If you don't do that, that's fine. You just have to submit this project administration form on LMS once you enroll into the subject. So there are some nice workarounds. And guys, that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say in terms of the actual presentation. What I really wanted to do is make sure that you guys got that info. And if you have any questions, Mark and Alex, since you're online, you have first dibs on questions at the moment. If not, I'm happy to take this offline. And if you have any other questions, shoot through an email and we can go from there. So thank you very much, guys. And hopefully I didn't waste too much of your time. So Alex, you want a question?
Not off the top of my head, to be honest. Maybe Mark might have a question.
Mark, you're all good with this? Yep, he's all good. I'm just repeating what he's typing in the chat. So that's it, guys. I wanted to make sure that I pop this content online so that everyone's clear on what needs to be done. Hopefully that's straightforward. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your applications and seeing how many of you will actually continue on. if you don't do EMS4WEX, you have other options to take on board, but my recommendation is that you do take this on. It's a great opportunity to continue doing what you're doing already with the company and actually writing a technical report, which will be very useful to your career, regardless of which pathway you follow down the track. All right, guys, wish you all a very nice evening, Thursday evening, and I look forward to seeing some of you next semester, and I'll come out to site and visit everyone else. So, guys, thank you very much. And
Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.